Hello, and welcome to this Community Day session. My name is Lucas, and I'm a Principal Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services. And today, if you can see from the screen, we're going to be talking about video. And we're going to be talking about how the AWS platform and the AWS Amplify toolkit will help you integrate video capabilities into your application, whether it's video on demand, whether it's live streaming, or you name it. So, why are we putting so much emphasis on video lately? Well, I got a few figures up on the screen that I'd like you to go one by one. We can see that roughly 50% of the top 100 applications contain at least some form of media. We can see that 78% of people watch videos on a weekly basis. We can see this 2019 statistics, so this is not really taking into account a lot of what's been happening this year, that 82% of the global traffic will come from video in 2022. Imagine what has been going on at a worldwide level these days, and if you want to sum up video calls, educational content, schools moving into virtual settings, it might not be to anyone's surprise that we're potentially lowballing that number. And we can see finally that 68% of people prefer to learn via video, and that's a number that keeps increasing year on year, and that's quite a unique thing, something that's obviously been changing throughout the years, and it's quite interesting to see a trend up. So what is a video streaming service? So what are the steps that you have to go through in order to deliver video or media back to your users? So I split this up in a few different steps. So we'll start at the beginning. First of all, probably the hardest one of all, you have to create the content. You have to produce it and upload it. And that's one that we can help you upload it, but we can't help you create it. Just you got to come up with the idea. You have to go and shoot it, and you have to make sure that it's up to what is it that you want to create. After that, we need to encode it. And when we say we're talking about encode, it's about processing that file that we just created. As you can see, we're saying process that content into an adapted bitrate. And if you're familiar to Netflix or YouTube, you might have seen that you can change the resolution of your files or the frames that it plays up, and that's sort of the adapted bitrate. So we gotta create content that can be played back in multiple devices, multiple resolutions, multiple different types of bandwidth, so on and so forth. After that, we need to store it. The content needs to live somewhere, and from then on you have to sort of go up and deliver it up to your users. You could technically deliver it or play it from where the content is stored, but traditionally when you get to the production level delivery, you want to have that content as close to your user as possible. You want to minimize the latency that your clients need to go through in order to retrieve that content. And so this is where content delivery networks come in. And in the case of AWS, we got a service called CloudFront, which is our CDN network, and that CDN network is made up of hundreds of points of presence throughout the globe that are likely to guarantee that they'll have one as close to your users as much as possible, right? And so when your users go and play and trying to retrieve your content, they don't need to go to the source. There will be a point of presence, or there will be a location near them that is storing that content and potentially caching it if your content can be cached. After that, obviously, your users will be playing that content in your devices, and will be happy days. So how can AWS help you? And what sort of these tools and services you have at your disposal? So we're going to talk about it specifically today about one angle of Amplify, but I wanted to start first by talking a little bit about what is Amplify. If you're not familiar with the toolkit, Amplify as a whole, Amplify the brand, is a development platform, and it's made up of a number of few different components. So we can see here that we got a CLI component, we got a console component, we got libraries, and we got components. Those components will be UI components that you will embed in your mobiles or web apps, libraries that will help you create your applications, the console that it will help you perform that CI/CD capabilities. It will help you host your applications, and then the CLI, which is what we'll be focusing on today, is the tool that will allow you to create, to provision, and to manage AWS services. The AWS Amplify CLI is quite opinionated, right? There is quite a convention of a configuration. We want to make it super easy for users to get started, to provision the resources, super easy for people that are not super familiar with AWS to jump in, write a few commands, answer a few questions, and just get up and running as quickly as possible. And if you can see here, the type of commands that you will be using with Amplify are fairly simple. You might be issuing an init command if you want to start a new project. You might be adding an API, you might be mocking if you want to do some local development as well. And once you're ready, you can push that up to the cloud and sort of, we'll take on the process of creating all of those resources. Amplify is made up of different categories, and you can see here, where we can help you. We can create APIs. So for example, if you want to stand up a new REST API or a new GraphQL API, the CLI will allow you to help that. You can do authentication, you can do interactions, analytics, real-time notifications, you can do storage, so on and so forth. There's likely to be a category that is sort of will help you with a particular use case. And so when we're talking about those categories, there's another way of looking at them. And the other way of looking at them is that effectively those categories are plugins of the wider Amplify ecosystem. And so once you start looking into that ecosystem, you realize there are what we can call first-party plugins and third-party plugins. So what we were discussing before, your data stores, your APIs, storage, and so on and so forth, those are, you might think of them as first-party plugins. Those are developed by the Amplify team themselves, but we're not limited to those. The plugin development is open source, and anyone can jump in and create their own plugins for their own needs. And sort of one of the things that we'll be talking about today is about this third-party open source plugin, which will help you with your video capabilities. If you want to get started with plugin development for AWS Amplify, I recommend you to jump into that URL. We have a Discord channel as well that you can come in and ask questions, and it's really useful. And I'll recommend to anyone to check that out, and to also check that out what the wider ecosystem has to offer. When we're talking about video, we were talking about this third-party plugin, which is the Amplify Video plugin. And basically what it allows you to do is to stand up 3 different types of architectures that will support video capabilities on AWS. You can use it alongside any other of your Amplify resources. If you can see in your example here, we're following the convention of Amplify of adding resources, and now we have a new category called video, and we can add that one to our existing Amplify project and just work alongside any other resources that we've created. Because it's open source, because it's CloudFormation, for our infrastructure as code capabilities, the templates are super easy to customize, so you can go and change it as needed if you're not happy with some of the approaches that we've been taking. So let's quickly talk about some of the architectures that will be standing up using the plugin. So the first one is for live streaming capabilities. So we can see here when we're using the plugin, and we'll see in a demo in a little bit on how that works. When we select live streaming capabilities, behind the scenes, this is sort of the architecture at a high level that we'll be creating on the AWS platform to enable those capabilities back for you. So if we can see at AWS level, we'll be standing up a few different services from our Elemental Media Suite. We'll be standing up Media Live for live processing. This is where, if you remember, we were talking about the encoding part of the video. And then from then on, we have 2 paths. One is where we be packaging that video for delivery, and then one will be storing that video for playback capabilities. And then alongside those, we'll be creating a CDN or a distribution network on AWS, so we can push that content as close as possible back to our users. So in general, if you're new to live streaming, if you're new to media services, there's probably a better solution that we'll cover in just a little bit. This is really when you know what you're doing. This is probably for broadcast networks where they really understand and they really need to control every step of the way of their processing pipeline, the reproduction pipeline, and then really need to have the finer grade control on how to do things. Whereas if you're just getting started and you just want to live stream some content, you're probably looking for something a bit more hands-off on your end. The next reference architecture, or the next sort of services that we plug in together, is that video on demand solution. So this is not live streaming. This is more about, think about it as the Netflix-like solution, where you'll be storing a whole bunch of contents that your users can access at any time. And so, again, we'll be following the same sort of commands, and we'll be choosing a different option, in this case, a video on demand. And we can see that we'll be creating a processing pipeline. So we'll be uploading all of our content into an S3 bucket, or into an object store bucket on AWS. And then in a combination between Lambda and Media Convert, we'll be processing all of that content, and then we'll be storing it in a different bucket for reproduction and delivery. But alongside that, we're creating authentication and authorization. So obviously you want to potentially protect your content. You want to protect who can upload some of the content, who can reproduce some of your content. And this is the cognito piece that we have in there that will allow you to authenticate and authorize your users. And then we have our fourth box, which is our content management and metadata service. And this is sort of to enrich that playback experience that your users might have in the platform, where we might have a DynamoDB, our database, storing all of that metadata, and some Lambda functions, enriching our content. And we'll be delivering all of that back to the users using AWS AppSync, which is our managed GraphQL service. In some other examples, if you prefer to use REST APIs instead of GraphQL, you can do so. They're currently in beta. The support is only for GraphQL, but we'll be adding REST support in the short term as well. And the last architecture that I wanted to show you from the plugin is this interactive live service. So at a glance, at a very high level, this sort of produces the same type of experience that if we use the first one with the Elemental Media Suite. But in this case, we're making use of a relatively new service in the AWS platform, which is our interactive video service. So this interactive video service has been built off the backbone of Twitch.tv. For people that are familiar with Twitch, you know what I'm talking about. For people that are not familiar with Twitch, it's one of the largest live streaming sites. And sort of we'll be using that backbone to create this new managed service and managed offering. And we can see from an architectural perspective, this is a lot simpler. This is a lot more hands-off from a user's perspective. And if you're sort of new to this space and you should want to get started as soon as possible and as quickly as possible live streaming, you really want something that is quite opinionated, that has sensible defaults, that is for the most part a black box, that you don't have to really worry about creating endpoints and bit rates and latency and that sort of whole pipeline that we were talking about earlier before. And so the plugin will be creating a new instance of the interactive video service, or IVS, and alongside that we'll be creating a time metadata lambda function. Basically what that allows you to do is sort of enriching the live streaming experience. So you could potentially add annotations to your video. You can potentially enrich the whole playback capability by sending information back to your users at the specified time that you require. So our interactive video service, just as a recap, this is a fully managed service. You create it, and it gives you an endpoint, and it gives you an URL, an output URL that you can sort of watch your stream. That's all it is. It has, we'll see in a demo, but it has about 2 or 3 different options that you can choose from, and from then on we'll take over, we'll create everything that we need to create, and we'll just give you an endpoint, which is where you want to start streaming to. We're creating that time metadata service that allows you to sync video, like I was just talking about before, sort of to enrich the playback capabilities. And it has an ultra low latency mode that you can choose from, which is about 5 milliseconds, from creating to streaming back to your users, which is really, really low. So now we're gonna head and have a look at a little bit of a quick demo. Okay, so I'll turn off my camera so you can see my screen a bit more clearly once we jump into our demo environment. So let's go ahead and do that now. So as you can see my terminal right now, and I want to demo a few things today. I don't want to just demo our video capabilities, but I also want to demo the full end-to-end Amplify experience. So we're here in an empty project. Nothing has been created here. And what we'll do first is go ahead and create a new Amplify project. So we'll be issuing an Amplify init command, and this is sort of warming up us up to, I guess, a whole Amplify experience. So, Amplify followed this wizard-like approach for creating resources, and also, provides you with sensible defaults that you don't really need to think much. Most of the questions are yes or no questions, and sort of this sort of free flow text questions are just for creating names for resources typically. So we'll go ahead and create some of our sensible defaults. We don't really care much about these today for this demo. And we'll go ahead and now we're really starting our CloudFormation provider. So CloudFormation is our infrastructure as code service on AWS. And Amplify picks up that I have a few AWS profiles, and it asks me whether I want to choose one of those. And this is for security and permissions to make sure that I have the right access to the account that I want to create those resources. So I'll say yes, and I'll pick my profile. And as soon as I pick my profile, the Amplify CLI just starts creating some of the resources behind the scenes that are needed for every Amplify project to work. So right now we're not creating any of the video capabilities that we've been talking about. We're not creating APIs, we're not creating anything like that. We're just creating the supporting infrastructure. So it just consists of a few IAM roles, our identity and access management roles. It creates a few buckets for object storage for our artifacts when we're creating things, and then it creates some of our CI/CD capabilities through the Amplify console. And as you can see, it takes just a couple of seconds, and now we're ready. Now we're ready to start creating resources, to start adding categories or plugins, if you will, into our project. So we'll go ahead and say Amplify add, and we'll say video. But you'll see that as we talked about video being a third-party plugin, it really looks and behaves in the same way as any of the standard out-of-the-box Amplify categories. There's really no difference to the experience when using third-party plugins as you were using a first-party plugin whatsoever. So we'll go ahead and select video, and again we're in this wizard-like experience, and we have three options, and these sort of reflect the three different architectures that we were discussing just before. And for the first one, we might create video on demand, and we'll say that we want to create a video on demand video capability. It's asking me for a friendly name. I'll choose my default friendly name. In here, I can sort of select the bitrate in which I want to provide video on demand back to my users. I'll leave it as the default to the adaptive bitrate, but I can hard code it, if you will, to HLS at 30 frames and 1080p, and the same one with accelerated transcoding. And if I know what I'm doing, I can bring on my own template as well. It's asking me whether this is a production environment. I'll say no. In reality, if it is a production environment, you will be saying yes, and that will be creating some of the distribution networks, the content distribution networks that we were discussing before. We don't really need those ones right this second. In here it's also telling me whether I want to create a new API to manage my videos. We'll say yes. As we were discussing before, right now there's support for GraphQL, but REST will be supported soon as well. We'll giving our API a name. We'll be selecting how do we want to authorize our API, and we'll say through Cognito. We'll leave the default settings for our Cognito user pool just as they are. I don't really want to do anything else with our pool. And then now we'll be asking a few questions around our API. So it's asking me whether I want to configure advanced settings. I don't really want to do that now. It's asking me whether I have a schema. we don't really have one right now. We'll select a sample model. It's asking me whether we want to edit our schema right now. We'll say yes, and I'll show you just in a second what that looks like. And it's asking me, whether do I want to define permissions in my schema, and I'll say that only admins can upload videos. And then it's asking me whether I want to override the schema. I'll say yes. And we want to see the model that we just created. So let's show what that looks like at the moment. So this is our GraphQL schema. So we can see that we created two different types of types in GraphQL, and we can see that we're annotating it with AppSync specific annotations that allow us to create rules around permissions and roles and sort of the operations. And in this case, we can see that for a video object, we're allowing it to groups, and we are allowing it to the admin group, and then we can say that anyone in the admin group can create, update, delete, and read. And we can also see that if you're an authenticated user but you're not part of the admin group, all that you can do is just reading that video object. So let's head back into our terminal. So we're happy with what you're seeing, so we say okay, and now all of our resources have been built. Now all of the resources have been built locally, and as we can see here, by running an Amplify Status command again, we'll be seeing that we're in the dev environment, and there's a whole bunch of resources that we created locally, but we haven't really yet pushed them up to the cloud. So we're not going to do that in this demo because that will take a few minutes to complete. So we'll use that time and add a different video category right now. And in this case, we'll use the AWS option. And we'll see this one is quite a lot simpler than the rest. So we'll give it a name. We just select the quality of our stream. So we'll say it will be an HD stream. What sort of the latency that I want, whether I want the standard or the ultra low. We'll select ultra low latency, which is around 5 seconds. That's it. Those are the two options that we need with AWS. And from then on, AWS will look after it. So we'll run a subsequent status command to see what else we got in there. And now we can see that not only my video on demand video resources are there, but also my live stream resources are also in there. And if I wanted to push this up into the cloud, I'll just run an Amplify push. But we won't do that now. It's just take a little bit of time. So we'll jump ahead into a completed scenario. So I'll have this folder here, which I've created some of the resources already. So we'll run an Amplify status, and we'll see in this one here, our operation is no change. That means I've already pushed all that up into my account. All the resources have been created, and since I've done that, I haven't done any more local changes. And we can see that because we already created some of those, I already provided with my GraphQL endpoint to access my VOD architecture. So the last thing that we can do is to sort of say, for example, we can issue the video plugin specific commands, so we can get the information for one of our resources. So for our video on demand resources, we want to get some information, and we can see here our input storage bucket. So this is a bucket name where we're expecting our video files to drop into, and the URL that will be playing back some of that content if we choose to. So let's head back into our presentation right now. So that's all I have from a demo perspective. I hope you enjoyed the session. We'll have some time for Q&A after this as well. So thank you for tuning in, and looking forward to your questions. Bye bye.